My sister ordered a $1,200 cake for her engagement, but when I delivered it, she told me I wasn't invited to stay at the party. To give you some context, I'm 26, a woman, and I've been running my own bakery business for the past few years. Things have been going pretty well, actually. My bakery is well known in the area, and for a while, we've even been thinking about expanding. I'm a professional baker, and baking has always been my passion. I graduated from culinary school and have enough experience to say I'm pretty good at what I do. When it comes to family, I usually get the cake orders. Most of the time, it's no big deal. I'm more than happy to bake for them, and I even offer them a discount, charging them less than I would other clients. There's one exception to that, though, my older sister. Let's call her Rebecca. She's 4 years older than me, and we used to get along pretty well. But things started to go south between us a few years ago. It was around 6 years ago when she introduced her boyfriend to the family for Thanksgiving dinner. At the time, she had just started a new job, and they had only been dating a few months. But it was clear she was serious about him. What I didn't know was whether he felt the same way about her. After dinner, I went outside for a smoke, and he followed me. To my surprise, he started flirting with me. It made me uncomfortable, so I quickly ended the conversation and went back inside. That night, I pulled Rebecca aside and told her what had happened. She seemed upset, but didn't say much about it. She just said she'd look into it later. I didn't think much of it at the time. I thought I had done the right thing by telling her. It was now up to her how she wanted to handle it. But after that, things started to change. Rebecca began distancing herself from me. I tried to reach out, tried to spend time with her, but she just pulled away. She never gave me an explanation. A few months later, she broke up with that boyfriend, but even after that, things didn't go back to normal between us. I became frustrated with how she treated me, constantly blowing me off, acting as if she didn't want anything to do with me. Eventually, I stopped putting in the effort to keep in touch. We became nothing more than acquaintances at family gatherings, polite, but not close. It wasn't until about 3 years ago that I learned what had really happened, why she had cut me off so suddenly. Our cousin Lana, who both Rebecca and I are very close to, finally told me the truth. She hadn't said anything before because she wasn't sure it was her place, but now that we had all grown up, she felt it was time to tell me. Apparently, after I spoke to Rebecca about her boyfriend, Rebecca had confronted him. He denied everything and claimed that I had twisted the story, saying that I was the one hitting on him. And shockingly, Rebecca believed him. According to Lana, Rebecca was insecure about me at the time and thought I might try to steal her boyfriend. It hurt to hear that, especially when Lana said Rebecca had never explicitly mentioned her insecurities, but the way she talked about me made it clear. It was as if, up until that point, I had always been Rebecca's little sister, the one in her shadow. But after that incident, I was becoming my own person, and that must have felt threatening to her, especially when her boyfriend was showing interest in me. It stung deeply that she believed a stranger over me, all because she needed a reason to dislike me. She was willing to paint me as the villain just for telling the truth, just for refusing to stay in her shadow all my life. Lana consoled me, saying it wasn't my fault, but honestly, I don't think I ever really got over it. I had always thought Rebecca and I were close enough that nothing like this could tear us apart. But that turned out to be just my expectation, one-sided, I guess. It's hard to realize that she was actually looking for any excuse to push me away. She wanted to freely talk badly about me to others without feeling guilty. By the time I found out all of this, it was already too late. Rebecca and I hadn't spoken in years. Confronting her about it now didn't feel worth it. We had moved on from each other, and it was easier just to leave it behind. I found out when Rebecca had already been pregnant, and I didn't want to add unnecessary stress to her life, or mine, by bringing up all of this. It wasn't the right time. She had been dating her now fiancé, David, for a year by then, and I had just started my business when her son was 5 months old. Now, I wasn't expecting my whole family to come to me for cakes for every event, but I thought that, despite everything, Rebecca would still reach out to me for her son's birthday. As a family, it was the least she could do for me. But once again, I was left feeling let down. I had hoped that people, especially my own family, would support my new business. Most of them did, some even acquaintances, not close friends, made sure to buy from me. But Rebecca? She was the exception. She wouldn't even consider a single transaction, and it stung. It felt like an insult. The odd thing was, I was always invited to her son's birthday parties, each one more lavish than the last, complete with cakes from some fancy bakery I wasn't involved in. And my mother? She kept asking me to attend, urging me to play along, put on a united front for the sake of appearances. So, I kept going. For 3 years, I showed up to those birthday parties. But each time, there was this undercurrent of tension. The same group of nosy relatives would pounce on me with questions about the cake. "Is this your cake?" they'd ask, knowing full well it wasn't. And I'd have to answer, every time, "No, Becca got it from somewhere else." They'd always smile, almost like they were savoring the drama. It made me sick. I was tired of the same questions, the same uncomfortable atmosphere every year. This year, I'd had enough. I decided not to go. I wasn't concerned with appearances anymore, not as much as I once was. My mother, of course, was upset. But my dad? He didn't care. My sister, though, she didn't seem bothered at all. She didn't act like anything had changed at the party, at least not from the pictures I saw online. And perhaps that's when she decided to drop the act, stop pretending. She blocked me on every social media platform shortly after. And you know what? I was fine with it. We hadn't been close for years. It wasn't like we were friends. She had made it crystal clear to me before that the only reason I was ever invited to her family events was because our mothers thought we should at least pretend to be civil. That was it. That was the only reason. It was almost 5 months ago now, and since then, we've had no contact. There were weddings and events, but instead of the usual awkward greetings when we'd run into each other, we just avoided one another. And honestly, I didn't mind. She had the issue with me, so let her ignore me all she wanted. I didn't care anymore. I had given up hope that we'd ever have a real relationship again. Then, 2 weeks ago, she unblocked me. She reached out. I thought, maybe, just maybe, she was finally going to acknowledge everything that had gone wrong between us. I didn't expect an apology, but I thought she might recognize that something was wrong, that we had been treating each other poorly for years. But no! Instead, she simply said she had an order for me. I had heard through the grapevine that she was engaged. After 4 years with David, he'd finally popped the question. They were getting married soon, so I figured this was it. She was probably asking me to make her a cake for the engagement party. I was right, but what caught me off guard was how cold and abrupt she was about it. No pleasantries. No please. No thank you. Just, I need a 5-tier cake for my engagement party this weekend. Let me know the price tonight. That's it. No warmth, no respect. It was the kind of message I would never expect from a regular client, let alone family. It felt strange. Rude, even. Still, I kept my professionalism. I responded as I would to any other customer, asking for more details about the cake. Business is business, after all. She clarified the design she wanted, and I quoted her a price of $1,200. The cake was going to be elaborate, and the timeline was tight. I explained that it was going to take a lot of work to pull off, and I wasn't even charging her for delivery. Her response? She said it was too much. She wanted me to lower the price. I told her this was the best I could do. I was offering a family discount, and under normal circumstances, I would have charged more for a cake of that size and complexity. I even explained that I usually require at least 2 weeks' notice for cakes like this, but I was making an exception for her. Still, she wasn't happy, but she didn't cancel. So, I went ahead with the order. 2 days ago, I delivered the cake. My assistant and I arrived at the venue about 30 minutes before the event was set to start. Rebecca actually seemed impressed with the cake, even complimenting me on how it turned out. She was polite enough, and for a moment, I thought maybe this was a turning point. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change between us. Normally, after a delivery, I'd make sure everything was set and then leave. But this time, I figured I could stay. After all, I was her sister. Family. Surely, she wouldn't mind. Would she? It started off like a simple business deal. A few days of discussing cakes, fine details, all leading up to this moment. At first, it felt like we were on good terms, everything seemed to be going smoothly. But, as I later learned, I couldn't have been more wrong. I thought I understood the situation, but I was just setting myself up for an embarrassing blow. My assistant had already left, heading back to the store, and I stayed behind for a few extra minutes. Slowly, people began trickling into the event. Rebecca, having already placed the cake on the designated table, was about to greet her guests. Just as she turned to leave, she shot me a confused look and asked what I was still waiting for. I was stunned. For a moment, I couldn't process it, and all I could do was stand there, silent, unsure of what was happening. And then, like a slap in the face, she told me that while she appreciated the cake, I wasn't actually invited to the event. She made it clear it was nothing personal, just professional. I'd really appreciate it if you could leave, she said, explaining that having me around would only fuel gossip about us. The last thing she wanted was speculation swirling about whether we were fixing our relationship. After all, that day wasn't about us, it was supposed to celebrate her and her fiancé. I felt like I had been slapped in the gut. The humiliation hit me like a wave, and part of me wanted to turn and walk out right then and there. But then, my parents walked in. They didn't even notice me standing off to the side, and maybe that's what stung the most. I didn't blame them, but seeing them there made everything worse. It felt like Rebecca was sending me a clear message, reminding me that, no matter what I thought, I was nothing to her. I had given her a discount, gone out of my way to accommodate her, and yet here I was, being treated like an outsider. That feeling was unbearable. I decided I wasn't just going to walk away quietly. This was it, I was going to get back at her, no matter what. Maybe this was where I went wrong, but in that moment, I didn't care. I grabbed the nearest glass of wine, my hands shaking with anger, and I made my move. I wasn't going to be ignored or humiliated any longer. Standing up, I clinked my glass to get everyone's attention and began my impromptu speech. All eyes turned to me, most surprised to see me there. The air was thick with tension as I stood in front of them, knowing this was going to get ugly. Rebecca's face twisted with panic as she mouthed the words, "Shut up," but it only fueled my fire. I couldn't stop now. I started with the truth, how we used to be close, how things had changed, how she'd let jealousy and insecurity poison our friendship. I told everyone about Thanksgiving 6 years ago, how she stopped talking to me because of her then-boyfriend, a relationship that ended months later, leaving her angry and resentful. And yet, she needed a reason to hate me, and I gave it to her by simply being honest. I didn't hold back, not anymore. I spoke of how she blocked me on every platform, how I wasn't even invited to her son's birthday party this year. And then, I let everyone in on the fact that she had contacted me just days before, asking me to arrange everything for her engagement cake, and yet, when I showed up, I wasn't even welcomed. And the kicker? She still hadn't paid for the cake. Usually, I don't accept orders without payment up front, but for some reason, I had made an exception. And how was I repaid? With disrespect and humiliation. I raged. I called her every name I had been holding back for years. It felt like a weight lifting off my chest as I stormed out of that venue, not caring about anything else. The drive back to my store was a blur, my mind racing with thoughts of how everything had gone so terribly wrong. I didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to face anyone. I turned my phone off, hoping to calm down, to regain some composure. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone back on later that night. I expected messages from my parents, worried they'd be concerned. What I didn't expect was that they'd side with Rebecca. Both of them. I thought maybe my mother, sure, but my father too. I was shocked. They said I had ruined her party with my unprofessional behavior. They felt I should publicly apologize for what I had done. They argued that airing our dirty laundry in front of everyone, her friends, colleagues, and family, was unfair. They acknowledged what Rebecca did to me was wrong, but they believed I had crossed a line. My father told me I should have waited until the event was over, handled it privately. They wanted me to make a public apology. They thought that was the only way to fix things. But I couldn't understand it. My anger flared again. I called them, barely holding back. I didn't care what they thought anymore. I told them I would not apologize. What Rebecca did to me was beyond humiliating, and she didn't deserve my apology. They said they understood my pain, but they still believed I had wronged her. It felt like everything had spiraled out of control, and I was caught in the middle. They said they couldn't support me unless I apologized, and I refused. The fight grew heated, and by the end of it, no one in my family was speaking to me anymore. It reached a point where I couldn't avoid it anymore. Maybe I had crossed a line, maybe I had done something wrong, and maybe, just maybe, my actions weren't justified. I've been reflecting on this, not just personally, but professionally too. The whole thing made me realize it might not have looked great on my part. She had clearly intended for it to be a business arrangement, a simple transaction, but I had blurred the lines. I treated her like family. It was a gesture of kindness, but maybe I should have just stuck to business and kept things professional, like I would with any other client. Why didn't I? I pushed myself too far, went above and beyond. And now, I feel like I've been played, like I'm the fool here. Even making that toast, honestly, it didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. It soured my relationship with my parents. They're not even speaking to me anymore unless I apologize to Rebecca. It's like everything I've done has led to this, and I have no idea how to deal with it. I never thought I'd end up here, in this mess, with no clear way forward. I could go on not speaking to Rebecca, but I can't let that affect my bond with my parents. I love them deeply, and I need to find a way back to them. But what should I do? Should I swallow my pride and apologize to Rebecca to end this nightmare? A couple of days passed, and I made a decision. I decided to apologize. I didn't care if she deserved it or not. I just wanted to move past this, to put it behind me, and hopefully, restore my relationship with my parents. That's all I really wanted. 5 days had passed since the fiasco at the party, 5 long days without a word from my parents. And just as I was about to make that apology, my dad reached out to me. He started by apologizing, telling me he was sorry for how he'd reacted. He acknowledged that he hadn't considered how I was feeling that day. They'd spent so much time focusing on how I'd ruined the party, how my actions left a bad impression. But he told me they hadn't thought about what it must have taken for me to act the way I did. They realized they hadn't been listening to me at all. They'd been so wrapped up in their own expectations, what looked good to others, how things should appear, that they hadn't taken a moment to truly understand me. They admitted that their reactions were driven by the pressure to present the perfect family, but in doing so, they invalidated my feelings. I wasn't just acting out for no reason, they realized. It wasn't about me being unreasonable, it was a result of being pushed too far. They didn't excuse my behavior, but they apologized for how they dismissed me. They told me they wanted to listen to my side of things, and finally, hear what had led me to act that way. It was clear that neither of us had been listening to the other, which is why we hadn't spoken for 5 days. They had already spoken to Rebecca, and she would be paying me the money I was owed in a few days. But now, they wanted to hear from me. So, I told them everything. How I had treated Rebecca like family, how I had gone out of my way for her, and yet, it wasn't enough. She didn't even extend basic decency to me. I felt used and betrayed. I couldn't understand why she would have me bake this expensive cake and then tell me I wasn't invited, demanding I leave. It was too much to take. My reaction, though extreme, was a long time coming. I regret it, but at that moment, I felt justified. I didn't think I owed her an apology, not after everything. My parents understood. They didn't think it was their place to forgive me, but they also weren't going to hold it against me. They had made their decision to step back from the situation, leaving it up to Rebecca and me to figure things out on our own. I respected that. At least, there was clarity now, between me and my parents. As for Rebecca, I don't know what's going to happen. All I could do was wait and hope she'd pay me the money she owed. Weeks passed. It's been over a week since the engagement party, and finally, I received the payment. But there was a catch. She deducted a portion of the money. She claimed it was because of my behavior at the party, that I didn't deserve the full amount. And honestly, I can't say I was surprised. If I were in her position, I might have done the same. I don't want to engage with her anymore. I don't want any more interaction with her. This whole ordeal has drained me, and I just want to move on. I can always find new clients, make up the lost money. But what I can't recover is my mental peace. The time I'd waste trying to convince her to see things my way. So, it's better to just let it go. My parents and I are back to normal, as though the whole mess never happened. That's a relief. Then came an update. Rebecca got married a few days ago. Obviously, I wasn't invited. But, honestly, I didn't want to be part of anything that involved her, not after everything that had happened. I think she feels the same way about me. My parents went, of course, and had a good time, but they didn't bring it up to me. and I appreciate that. Even my mother, who had a hard time understanding why Rebecca and I don't get along, respected that we don't want to speak or even hear about each other anymore. It's become clear that we're just two people who have gone our separate ways. We'll continue to ignore each other at family events. And you know what? I think that's for the best in the long run. I do wish Rebecca happiness and success in her marriage, but I'm not sure if reconciliation will ever happen. If it does, great. But if it doesn't, I'm okay with that. My business is thriving, I have a solid relationship with my parents, and though I may have lost a sister, I've gained something valuable. I've found someone who truly cares, Lana. She's been by my side through all of this. I've got wonderful friends and coworkers. Life isn't perfect, but it's good.